Okay. Anyway, thanks for everyone who watched my video yesterday and gave me some feedback with it. And based on what some questions I was asked, I thought it'd be easier just to do a follow-up video. So firstly, one of the comments made was that isn't peripartum cardiomyopathy different from cardiomyopathy, and women can quickly recover? Well, in one ways, yes, because there is science to support the fact that fetal cells from the baby do migrate to the mother's heart, and this was found in mouse studies where the fetal cells were able to repair the mother's heart. But on the other side of things, there's also plenty of testimonials and stories where people have recovered fully from cardiomyopathy. An example of a friend's mum who was in her 60s, her EF was 15%. She did all the right things, changed her mindset, plant-based diet, threw out all her white food, daily walking, and within 9 months she fully recovered. So if you know that 15% to fully recovered, that's pretty impressive in 9 months. Her cardiologists have really nothing to say. So it's when I'm talking about, the mind being the most powerful thing, it's not just a thing of, oh, okay, I'll just believe it and it'll happen. I'm not talking about wishful thinking. What I'm talking about is, firstly, you have to believe that it's possible in order to action and change your life, to do the things that you need to do to get you the results that you want. So that's the first thing. So this video actually is about statistics and how it has been misused in medicine in particular, to sell products. Now, I have a degree in statistics, so I think I'm able to speak on this. I graduated top of my class almost, HDs all the way. So I was quite, brilliant student. Now, the thing was, after I finished my degree, I kind of felt like, oh, wow, what a waste of a 3-year course, because there are a lot of flaws in statistics. And basically, let me give you the crux of it. You can make any study say whatever you want it to say. And so therefore, when you're looking at a study, you actually have to go back to analyze the raw data and the actual study and how they structured it, how they chose, who was in it, what logic was implemented in it, how big the sample size was, and you have to look at the big picture as well. And of course, no one needs to do that, because if you've already got an outcome that you want, you'll just structure the study to design the results that you want. And that's an unfortunate part about this world. It's ruled by money. Now, of course, scientific achievement is one thing where, you have something, and like engineering, for example, if a car has to run, every part of the car has to work. Now, when it comes to statistics, you're basing it on data, and it doesn't have to work. It doesn't have to be the truth. The doctor can say to you, oh, I think you're going to, like they said to me, you're going to be on medication for the rest of your life with a heart that half works. And where was the data that they based this information on? Did they have, a 30, 40-year-old woman who had 11 children, that had developed heart failure, who was my genetics and so forth, that they were basing all this evidence on? No, they didn't. They make these wild statements because that's what they've been taught to do in medical school. And where is the basis for it? Now, to say that I'm not talking out of my head, there is actually a paper written by and published in 2005, and what it says is there is an increasing concern that most current published research findings are false. The probability that a research paper claim is true may depend on the study power and bias, the number of other studies on the same question, and importantly, the ratio of true and no relationships among the relationships probed in each scientific field. In this framework, a research finding is less likely to be true when the studies conducted in the field are smaller, when the effect sizes are smaller, when there is greater number of and lesser pre-selection or tested relationships, where there is greater flexibility in designs, definitions, outcomes, and analytical models, where there is greater financial and interest and prejudice, and where more teams are involved in the scientific field in the chase of statistical significance. Simulations show that for most study designs and settings, it is more likely for a research claim to be false than true. Moreover, for many current scientific fields, claimed research findings may often be simply accurate measures of prevailing bias. In this essay, I discuss the implications of these problems for the conduct and interpretation of research. Now, that pretty much just said exactly what I'm telling you, and that is that, studies are biased, and you really have to go down to the individual, who's writing the study. Is it really independent? I think that really is where it comes down to, is the honesty of the researcher and whether they have financial interests in, or motivations like whether they're going to get grants or more funding, those sort of things. So for this one, what I'm going to talk about is sample size. Sample size can really greatly affect a study. This is one way you can stack a study in your favour. By having small sample size, you can generate pretty much amazing results. You can just predetermine who you're going to select and what outcome that you want to see. It's also really impossible to get a uniformity of variables. So when you're talking about, say, heart failure, you've got all different age groups, you've got people eating all sorts of different things, living different lifestyles, and you're lumping them all in together into a study and giving them, all different treatments as well. And each one of them will have, varying lifestyle choices that you just cannot standardize and make exactly the same in order to determine a result on that analysis that is absolute truth and say, okay, it was definitely this. Also, another clever way that scientific papers are to get results from scientific papers is the end point, to determine the end point of a study. So often we hear, oh, look, if you have this particular drug or treatment, then there's then you'll live, right? But how do they classify what that end point is? So the survival rate is often a 5-year survival rate. So basically, if you're still alive at that 5-year mark, then you're deemed to have survived and lived, and therefore the treatment is seen to be okay, that good, essentially. But 5 years goes pretty fast. It's only around 250 weeks, and it doesn't actually measure whether you're in decline. You're going to die in year 6. Another way that they all, so for actually the interesting thing, note, was for the Pfizer trials, the endpoint was actually 14 days initially, and then they extended it to 21 days. So you can see that if you had not caught COVID in 14 to 21 days, that proved that the vaccine, I shouldn't have said that, that proved that this medication worked. So another way that they do it is, we think that we often think that placebos means water. Well, placebos, unfortunately, they don't mean water. And what they might swap it out with is, you might be comparing different medications. So you might be comparing the effect of one medication against another, or one treatment against another treatment, not against a placebo. Therefore, how do you measure safety? You know. So, what are another things? Oh yes, another thing that I've seen they do is mixing samples. So, for example, in Haiti, apparently, according to the data they have, the incidence of postpartum cardiomyopathy is about 1 in 200, and in the States, in the United States and the Western world, it's guessed at about 1 in 2,000 thereabouts. No one really knows because no one's really collecting the data on it. So a lot of this is best guess and anecdotal. We just seem to know and believe this because of what we see around us and how many people that you might know that have postpartum cardiomyopathy. So in one of the studies that I saw on birth outcomes for postpartum cardiomyopathy mothers, they mixed the samples or the women from Haiti and the US together and in the same group. So the results were mingled together. And as you know, like you would expect them to have divided the groups because they're totally different populations. And this was an absolute no-no in statistics to mix populations with different characteristics to determine an outcome because you're just going to get a flawed outcome. Another thing is, let's say, for example, just raw data. We're talking what does, averages and so forth mean? How do you interpret results? So we know that the C-section rate in South America, in Argentina in particular, is from 2014 to 2017 was 55.8%. And that's quite high. Whereas in Australia, 10 years ago it was 32%. 10 years ago it was 20%, and now it's sitting around 32%. Now you've got this data. Now how do you interpret that data? Do you say, okay, women in Argentina are, I don't know, poorer, or how will we decide what is the reason for firstly the Australia increasing caesarean rate? Are women's health is it getting poorer, and that's why we're having more C-sections? Is it to do with medical interventions? It's even though you have raw data in itself, it's really up to the statistician to decide how does that data going to be interpreted. There is an element of bias in it. For example, they've found that with the flu that we're not meant to mention, that those who smoked are less likely to get it. Now the thing is, if you were trying to prove the safety or the most amazing benefits of smoking, you would say, great, look at the data. It's saying that if you smoke, you're not going to get, the vid, But of course, no one's going to publish a study that says that because they'd be absolutely laughed at. So there is a sense that as far as scientific research goes, it's all underlying a belief system. We have a certain belief system of the person who is doing the analysis, as well as the community or the society that we live under, of what we what we believe, and therefore we interpret data according to that belief system. Another method that is used often in scientific analysis to bias results is outliners. Now, outliners are data that don't fit the set. So an outliner might be, for example, a 64, 70-year-old cardiomyopathy patient who recovers fully in 9 months. Now, that's an outliner. So instead of, what you would think modern medicine would do and think, wow, that's amazing. Someone's recovered in this amount of time, what did they do? No, that doesn't actually happen. I actually returned to my cardiologist and I was recovered, and I thought, goodness, I got this opportunity to tell them exactly what I did, and it could help so many people. No, he didn't actually want to know. And a friend of mine actually said to me, he's a nurse at 30 years, she said, well, the big money, Jeannie, is in the devices and heart transplants. It is not in, curing patients. And it takes a long time to talk through patients about nutrition and lifestyle changes. So better off just giving them, what the medical system does, which is drugs and surgery. So outliners are actually taken out, because they kind of disrupt the data set. They skew it too far. So things that are too high or too low are taken out. And that's another way that studies can be biased, because who decides what outliners are taken out? Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I could probably go on, but you got the picture of how you can use statistics in all sorts of wonderful ways to say whatever you want. As for the question of whether, after, I had a question whether, let's say you have a baby after, oh yeah, this is another one, yes. I was asked the question about postpartum cardiomyopathy and having babies after you've fully recovered, or say, and the general thing that most doctors will say, oh, it's terribly dangerous and you'll probably die, which is what I was told. But having run a postpartum cardiomyopathy pregnancy and birth group for 10 years and being part of that community, well, that's really not true. That's not what we're seeing on the ground. The vast majority of women go on to have successful pregnancies and births, and but where is that reflected in the studies? Who's studying that? And it's a belief system that doctors will tell patients. And another thing is survival rate. Again, what is the long-term prognosis of a postpartum cardiomyopathy or cardiomyopathy person? And the thing is, if you're looking at studies, no one really knows, because no one's really collecting the data. So what I would say is you could do a study, say, for example, on what would be your outcomes if you drank, Coca-Cola or soda every day in place of spring water or mineral water, and see, based on what happens in 30 years' time, who lived the longest, and eventually, it would most likely result in the person who drank the spring water and mineral water. Are you really going to wait that long for a study to basically teach what is common sense? That you have to exercise common sense in knowing what is good and what isn't good for you. You don't need a study to tell you that daily walking and good nutrition and staying away from fried foods and fatty and things that are damaging to the heart, and not doing all the positive things is you don't need a study to tell you the obvious. That's what I'm trying to say. That a lot of people will say, well, what if I do all of these things and nothing happens? Well, it's never happened. I've never seen anyone go the whole way and do everything and good doesn't happen. You get what you put into life. And that's why I would say, look, you've got nothing to lose. I mean, certainly it's a bit of a change to change your life. There's often difficulties with any change that you make to habits. But if you really want to live and live not just a long time, but a good life, then you'll make all the changes that you need to. And look, life is unpredictable. You could walk down the road and, you could be hit by a bus. So it's not that anything is guaranteed in life, but give yourself the best chance. That's all I'm saying. And don't rely on studies to tell you the obvious of what you and your heart know, because it's really just becomes an excuse to not make change. Okay,